Welcome to the Education Innovators Podcast. I'm Eric Byron, and it is my privilege to host this show where we get to talk to folks from all over the world who are education thought leaders and innovators. We are going to hear inspiring stories from educators and edtech founders and AI experts and others who are fearlessly innovating and delivering unique learning experiences. I'm glad you're here. Let's get started.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
it was those people who I wanted to find a way to utilize, right?
Mm,
I had the ability to get stuff done inside of those four walls, but then outside of those four walls, there's this huge community of brilliant people all running in the same area, and if I could find ways to enlist them, that
yeah.
was really how I was going to get work done. More
Yeah.
more than me just like trying to do it on my own. It was like, how do I find the community? How do I empower the community, to run forward?
Yeah. That's Mark DeLoura. You're going to love this guy. Smart, successful, massively collaborative. And so listen as he shares stories of his time working in the White House and his passion for education and gaming. All right, you ready?
Sure, fire away.
Okay. Welcome to the Education Innovators Podcast. I'm Eric Byron, and I am joined today with Mark DeLoura. So he's a game and education technology consultant who spent almost 2 years as the senior advisor for digital media at the White House Office of Science and Technology Policy. He's a veteran of the games industry. Mark was honored with the Game Developers Choice Ambassador Award. So Mark is kind of basically, he's me, just better. He's more successful and more influential in his career and across the industry. So welcome to the show, Mark.
Hey, Eric. How you doing? Thanks for having me. Nice to meet you. Thanks for the introduction.
Yeah. By the way, you didn't send me a bio, so you get what you get there.
Oh, you're right. I didn't. Oh. Well, that was better than any bio I would have written, so it all worked out.
Oh, good. All right. So, well, let's jump in a little bit here. I want to
Yeah,
fill in some of the blanks on your background and how you kind
yeah,
of
yeah,
got there, right? So, from my reading, right, in your profile, you came up through the technical ranks in the game industry. So, you were a lead engineer at Nintendo, then you were a technical director at Ubisoft, finally a vice president of technology at THQ. You wrote some books, right? The
yep,
Game Programming Gem series, which really focused on the software development for games.
yep.
So at what point did you start focusing on educational games and how did you go from, being a technical leader in the game industry to your role at the White House?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Great question. Thank you for asking. I think I still think of myself as an engineer. I still write a fair amount of code, though definitely not like I used to, right? And that I have an engineer's heart. So I always approach everything from that sort of perspective. But so I got started in the mainstream game industry and was an engineer, like you said, at Nintendo and Sony, and then kind of transitioned away from platforms and more towards products. So I was at Ubisoft and THQ. Did a startup publisher around the time of the financial crisis. That was awesome timing, but led technology at those places. But really, like all during that period of time, I was always asking the question, like I love solving puzzles. Like this is what I love about being an engineer is making something faster, making it prettier, making it more efficient, whatever. But puzzles in service of what? And the of what got more and more important to me over time.
Yeah.
And so I just kept looking at what we were creating, which were these super engaging experiences. Kids would play for hours, I would play for hours. I'm like, well, if we can create an experience like this, like how do we apply the same set of tools to things that you want to have people spend more time on, like learning, healthcare, fitness, or whatever it is that that particular person is up to in their life that they want to improve at. If we can make that experience more engaging and easier for them, like we should do that, right? And so
Yeah.
I was just kind of like, I think at the time, like one of the crazier people at the conferences, like just like poking people, like, hey, have you thought about this? Have you thought, we've been doing this kind of stuff for a long time, like on and off, right? You can look all the way back into the 90s and all the edutainment stuff, Oregon Trail and da 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 da. So there's always been a lot of experimentation in this. But in the last few decades, there's been less, I think, because of the perception that it's difficult to make these products and have a sustainable business. So I was just a loudmouth and lucky enough to meet some people who thought that idea was good as well, that worked in government. And they said, well, why don't you come and try to make a difference for the American people and put your money where your mouth is, basically. Like, what would you do if you had a seat at the White House and you could reach all the people you can reach from there? Like, what could you get done?
Yeah.
And so that's really like was a corner turner for me. It went from being something that, I was kind of rawing about, more to something that I was acting on. And the mandate there was to use games, but it wasn't to use games for anything in particular. The thing that really stuck for me, because of who I am, is games for learning.
Okay. Awesome. So the role was senior advisor digital media. So I assume that encompassed more than just games, right?
Yeah, ish. Well, you
You
know,
made it what you made it. Is that what you're saying? That
there's no there. I mean, there's some politics involved. You don't necessarily want to have a title in government that says, senior advisor for games.
okay.
So,
Chief
it was
game officer. Yeah, right. Yeah, it doesn't work. No.
yeah, it was
Okay.
maybe not necessarily. It's like putting a bullseye on your back. So that's what we chose, a digital media title. Um,
Okay.
One, to give me some cover fire. Two, to let me do other things beyond games. And I did end up doing, kind of focusing mostly on games for learning, and also on the K-12 computer science education bring up that happened around that same time. So pushing that, and I wrote President Obama's first speech about the importance of computer science in the classroom, and this kind of stuff.
Nice.
So it ended up
Yeah.
being those two things. It's really what I focused on.
Yeah. So I know you get asked this a lot, but you were there during, you just mentioned, right, Obama. So you were there during the Obama administration. So what was it like working at the White House? Obviously, it was political, and I mean, even just with your comment there about you couldn't have a title that mentioned games. So yeah, how much fun was that?
Yeah. Yeah, it was impossibly fun, and also impossible. 'Cause, I mean, the I think the thing that surprised me is, I was really coming in, I was thinking I'm gonna have to deal with a lot of politics. I'm not a person who loves dealing with politics, so I was a little bit worried about that. But what actually happened was that, the office that I was in the White House was, yeah, between 75 and 100 people when I was there, all scientists and hardcore technical people, also most of whom were not political people. So the design of the office is brilliant. Whoever originally designed it, to kind of, it's like I think of it like a Tootsie Roll. It's like, all of us sort of like we're the dolphins on the inside. Like we don't know how to go hunt around DC. We can't be political. We're the soft chewy center of like people who are really good at one or two little slices of life. Like, I'm really good in this area of games. There are people who are really good in the area of like quantum computing or climate science or whatever, who have maybe zero competence in politics. But the office itself has this shell of people kind of guarding you from the rest of DC, whose expertise is politics.
Right.
So great, you can run on all the policy related stuff. When you needed to interface with the rest of the political world, there were brilliant people there whose expertise was that, and you went to them and they would give you guidance. And I think without that, I would have been lost. That
Yeah.
was vital.
Good. Well, I'm glad you didn't have to spend your days, shaking hands and kissing babies and,
Oh, I did a lot of that. Don't.
oh, did you?
I still did a lot of that. Yeah, you
Oh,
bet.
okay.
I got really good at that.
Oh, okay.
but
Yeah.
but it was all in the service of something. Like, I didn't feel like I was glad handing for like no reason. It was like,
Yeah.
one of the great things about being there was the span of people who you met, because anybody who worked in that office was already, somebody brilliant and somebody I wanted to know and learn about what they were interested in. And the people that they would bring in and have meetings with was the same sort of situation. It's just like, I just want to meet as many people as possible, because you're all brilliant and passionate and doing really interesting things. And
Yeah.
so, yeah, I was doing a lot of handshaking, and yeah, definitely a lot of speaking. Yeah, it was
Nice,
an
nice.
amazing experience. But I joked, like, I didn't make many memories over that period of time, because it was such an adrenaline filled couple of years. It was like, I
Oh,
didn't get a lot of sleep. It's
oh,
like
well, I
some of
hope you
the
kept a
short term memory.
journal or something at least so you can go back and look at your notes and go, oh, yeah, that's right. I met him and
I
her
did.
and
Yeah.
we talked about this and that. Yeah.
I did. Yeah, it was exhausting. I understand why most people who go into government are only there for a couple of years at a time, outside of the elected
Yeah.
officials who are 4 or 8.
Yeah. Well, I've always said the best gigs are the gigs where you find yourself immersed with people who are smarter than you, right?
Mm,
I've always looked for that. right? I guess it's why I'm doing the show, so I can talk to people like you who are smarter than me, right? I always, and so it sounds like it was a great kind of experience in that regard, just surrounded by brilliant minds and people who think at a higher level, just brings you up, right? Raises your own game because you want to
Yeah.
be right there with them and go, oh, I better really focus because these people are the gears are turning way fast, right?
Yeah, yeah, and
Yeah.
it was those people who I wanted to find a way to utilize, right?
Mm,
I had the ability to get stuff done inside of those four walls, but then outside of those four walls, there's this huge community of brilliant people all running in the same area, and if I could find ways to enlist them, that
yep.
was really how I was going to get work done.
Yeah.
More than me just like trying to do it on my own. It was like, how do I find the community? How do I empower the community, to run forward?
Yeah. So let's talk about kind of that community in this market because for to me I'm looking at that time frame where you were there because this is also around the same time frame when I was at EA and I was trying to figure out again I was learning the game industry because I came into EA from outside, right? I had never worked in the game industry, had no experience in games, hadn't even really played games. I supported the industry buying games for my kids, but
Thank you.
I came in and then transitioned onto a game team. But at the same time, I was teaching computer science courses and I was engaged with a number of schools, and I ended up being a liaison for EA into the education community, kind of locally there, sitting on the board for a couple of schools and advising on curricula in digital media and that sort of thing.
Mm.
Again, we always called it digital media instead of gaming for
Yep.
that same reason. But what I also found though was there was complete resistance at EA to doing anything educational gaming, right? There wasn't enough
Yeah.
money in it. This was just not their thing, right? They were mass market. I've got to be able to make $1 million in the first week after launch, or this isn't worth doing the project kind of thing. So,
Yep.
but here you are at the White House trying to promote this stuff. And so how did you find the ability to get folks to develop these games, right? And how is that shifting? Because my sense is that now things are really starting to open up, and I'm kind of curious your feeling as to why. What's shifting in the
Mm.
market? What's changing now that there's more interest and more investment in educational gaming?
Yeah, it's a good question. Yeah, I've always felt like the game industry is a really difficult place to build a sustainable business. We always used to joke that you would like it's kind of like venture capital. You would build 10 products, nine of them would fail, and the 10th one would make enough money to cover the other nine, and then you were good to go. So it's really like and it's an executive in the game industry, especially back then, the decisions they need to make were all about risk assessment, at the top level.
Yeah.
How do I mitigate risk as much as possible? So when I went into the White House, that was the mindset that I brought in was, okay, these people, I kind of understand the decisions that they're having to make. Now trying to put that hat on, how do I do that for them in a way that just paves the roadway for them so that they can make that decision more easily in the way that I'm hoping that they will
Mm,
take. Um, and it's challenging. Like I think one of the ways, there's two or three different things that jump to mind, but the one especially is relevant for EA. We can talk about this. Was EA makes these huge experiences, spends a lot of money on building the environments, on building the technology. And what if you were to take a built experience and repurpose some of that content, or repurpose that engine, so that you weren't having to do the $40 million spend or whatever it is was to
yeah.
build Madden kind of around then? What if you could take that engine and you could take whatever from the experience in terms of art and music and now make something educational out of it? So now you don't have to worry as much about recouping that cost that it would have taken to make this game because you're recouping it through the entertainment version. What would it cost to do that? So trying to figure out how many people you would need, how much time you would need to do something that was an experience that would make sense. So they did that. This is just before I got into the White House. There was a group of people. So it was the Entertainment Software Association, which is kind of the game industry lobbying group in the US, plus Electronic Arts, Stanford Research Institute, Educational Testing Service, Pearson. I think Scholastic came on, but later. I'm going to forget some of the other people who were involved. Gates Foundation and MacArthur Foundation. This is where most of the money came from. All came together and said, great, well, we're going to fund the idea of building a lab that explores using games for learning and assessment. And so they called it Glass Lab, Games for Learning and Assessment, GLAISS. And it was at EA. And so it was at EA Redwood Shores. And it started up, I think, kind of mid 2011, I want to say. And it started up right around the same period of time that I knew I was trying to go to the White House, and I was going through the security clearances, and I couldn't talk to anybody about it. And so some friends over there reached out to me and were like, "Oh, do you want to get involved with this? We know you're passionate about this stuff." And I was like, "Yes, but
Yeah.
I can't tell you why." So I came on as a contract CTO to help spin that up. And then as my situation evolves, I passed it along, and I went to the White House. They did a bunch of amazing work. I think the most notable thing that you can point to is SimCity EDU. So kind of what I was talking about, building an educational experience on top of something, and that something was
Right.
SimCity. Unfortunately, they had enough money to kind of run really hard at this problem for 3 years, and then they ran out, which is about the time I was leaving the White House-ish. So I came on again and helped them shut the lab down, which is kind of sad, but they did some great work. And I think there's a game design handbook, the Glass Lab game design handbook. If you search for it on the web, you'll find a Games for Change talk, and you'll find a PDF. And those are invaluable. It's like the lessons learned distilled down from $10 million in 3 years and 35 really smart people. This is kind of the takeaway.
Yeah. No, I have seen that. I guess I didn't really know where it came from, the story behind it. So, oh, that's great. Yeah, to hear that. Yeah, I was at Tiburon on the East Coast, so we didn't know what
Yeah.
was going on at Redwood Shores there. They weren't talking
Yep.
about it with
Right,
with us.
right.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yep, I remember Tehran. Yep.
Yep. Yeah. So sorry. And just speaking of Tiburon, and just this week it was in the news. I worked on NCAA college football. I
Awesome.
was on that game team for 3 years, and then of course they shut it down, right? Licensing problems with
Oh yeah.
NCAA and whatever, right? And they've just now announced they're gonna relaunch it. I watched the trailer yesterday, and it gave me goosebumps. I was like, oh man, I miss those days working at
Aw.
Tiburon on that game. Yeah.
Oh, that's awesome. I'm gonna have to go watch that. I hadn't heard that. That's great.
Yeah. Yeah.
Aw.
So, all right, well, let's get back to kind of focusing. So, I'm interested in this kind of the business model of the marketplace for these kind of games, right? Because
Yeah.
it doesn't really happen unless there's money changing hands here, right? People have to make a living. They have to say, I mean, there are those of us who are just so passionate, right? We don't care. I don't need to make money, right? Or whether you're nonprofit or,
Yeah.
if I can just pay the bills and keep the lights on, I'm okay. But for the most part, the really talented ones are in studios that they have, you know, stakeholders and shareholders or whatever. They got to make some
Yeah.
money doing this. So how has that process evolved now, the marketplace over the last few years, and what do you see happening
Yeah.
there now? I know the market's growing. Well, we could talk more about the overall kind of market for serious games, but tell me about your thoughts just generally on the evolution here of that business model.
Yeah, it's a good question to ask. I think it's complex and multivariate, of course. I think that the thing that I could point to that's probably the biggest shift is just the move towards everything being digital over the past 10, 15 years,
Mhm.
and everybody having, a supercomputer in their pocket, right? That they have with them at all times. The ability to build a mobile game that doesn't cost the heavy price of a console game and more easily ship it, and it's on a platform that everybody already has. Well, you've just knocked down a whole bunch of barriers that were really tough for the longest amount of time, right?
Yeah.
Don't have to worry about distribution, don't have to worry about getting a publisher, don't have to worry about selling a platform. Great, 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 great. Still have to build a product, right? Still have to build a product. That's the hard part. And a product that's engaging as well as educational. But there's also probably 5 times as many developers now as there used to be. There's so many more game developers than there were before because there are so many more platforms, places to target different areas of the world that now have access where they didn't have access before, back when it was just console or just console and PC. So the market's grown a lot. That said, it's still really difficult to make these kind of products and to sell them, and to watch the different kinds of business models people have tried over time has been really interesting. I think that the Glass Lab games were flat pricing, right? You buy the game and it costs this, or for a classroom with K-12, it would be this much per year kind of situation based on the number
Right.
of students, this kind of thing. I think that the business models we've seen work more recently and work well are something. Well, I always think about the ABC Mouse business model because it was super clever, and I've seen a couple other people take a crack at it too, which is we're going to make this product and we're going to have it useful in schools for teachers for free. But if the students go home and their parents want them to continue playing the game and learn more, you can sign up for a subscription fee per month.
Okay.
And that seems to have done really well for, I know at least 3 companies that have done well with that business model. The challenge of that business model is you have to have a lot of content in order to do it well to justify a subscription fee, right? And producing all that content's expensive, so you might have to go take venture capital to like have the ability to build all that out before you can get to the point of having a subscription. There are, of course, still lots and lots of experiences that are a single purchase or that are, a monthly subscription fee, but are really finely tuned at one particular topic area or one slice of education. But it's just harder. It's just harder to make the justification. That it still continues to be difficult in this space. It's just so hard already to make a game that's entertaining enough that it motivates somebody to purchase it. Now you also want to make that educational. It's like that on itself is its own hard problems. You kind of got hard times hard, right?
Yeah.
And to try to get this to work. So, but like you said, there are more and more people taking a crack at it at varying levels and sizes of experiences. I've seen some really interesting stuff in informal learning in VR over the past 4 or 5 years, where people, when each new platform shows up, you can make smaller experiences more easily before people have these sort of big eyes for what the platform can do. So we saw a lot of small experiences when mobile spun up, and I think the same was true when VR spun up, and
Hmm.
probably the same will be true with AR. Is, if you want to get in there and try to do something educational that's more bite-sized, like now's the chance.
Okay. Well, let's talk about that. Bite size versus, as you say, having enough content to justify a subscription. So this is one of the other things I see out there. I see a lot of a studio, a group of passionate people come up with this idea. They create a game,
Mm.
and the game is wonderful. Teachers love the game. They want to put it in their classroom, but for a school or a school system, they look at it and they go, "Oh, it's a one-off, right? It's one game, and maybe 5 classes out of 100 would use this game. So do I go license this game now? I got to go through all of that. You know, do I spend on this one game, right? Even though it's wonderful, the schools are in this dilemma because there may be 30 of these wonderful little games out there, but now you got a school that's trying to figure out, do I negotiate 30 different licenses for, this one game that, has a very specific application in this, English language class or whatever, right? So,
Yep.
so for me, this is kind of problematic. They're wonderful and they're great, and we're seeing some really clever, creative things. I've been talking about some of them on my show here,
Yeah.
but it's still hard to make money that way because the schools just, they're not going to sign up for, you know, thousands of licenses or tens of thousands of licenses for these one-off games. So
Yep.
what's the solution there, Mark? Tell me how to help these guys.
Yeah. I mean, the converse of what you just said is that, like, you said one key term in there that's, like, for me, a gating factor, which is negotiating. Because you're
Yes.
right. That's the school district's going to want to negotiate and, like, get a deal to roll it out to the district. Great. So if you're going to negotiate, then you need a person on the other side who works with that developer who can have a conversation with you. And if you're a small little developer and you've made one game, wow, do you not have the resources to have that kind of conversation, right?
Yeah.
But really, it's the education space is definitely like it's a place. It's a social place. Like there are deals being done, and they're done between people. And you meet people at a conference, and you show them your title, and they might like it, and they might want to. They're going to want to talk to you about it.
Yeah.
It's a lot less automated, a lot less buying the thing online. Certainly, people do that, but at scale, at districts, at state level, it's all about people. And that's just so hard for a small developer to handle,
Yeah.
right? It's like
Yeah.
I have to be an expert in making my game, making it educational, making it fun, and also the business stuff.
Yeah.
It's just it's
So
hard.
so how about this So another model I have seen several do successfully, which seems to be a different kind of tactic, and I like it in principle anyway, is this idea of instead of just developing the game and then trying to sell it to the school, is going to the school and saying, what subject are you, having trouble with the student engagement? Partner with me and we'll develop the game together, right?
Yeah.
Then if we come up with something really good, right now we'll go try and sell it to other schools, right? But you
Mhm.
kind of co-design this thing with me. Now I've also got somebody on the education side because a small developer generally doesn't unless they've happened to have employed somebody who was a longtime teacher or something, right? Who's crossed over. But if you're just a game developer kind of purist and you want to do something in this space, you really need that insider educator view. And I always say,
Yeah,
I say
it's
it
true.
takes three disciplines, right? It takes the teacher, the educator who knows the content, right? This is what we're trying to get the students to learn. Then you have like an instructional designer, somebody who understands the learning science of how you scaffold that and present it and assessment components, right? And then you have a game designer, maybe a
Yeah.
writer, right, who helps with the narrative storytelling, character development stuff, and a game designer who understands game mechanics and how to make it fun. But you really need all those disciplines together. And I think this is why it's so hard to do this
Yeah.
really successfully.
Yeah,
Thoughts
no,
on
I
that?
think you totally
Yeah.
nailed it. I totally agree with that. I would extend it out even further. I always kind of think of it as like this is where the magic happens. It's the fact that you do need those people. It's like
Mm.
getting those people together in a room at that brain trust, like amazing things can develop. Also, nothing can happen, right? And on the the game development side, you not only need the designer, you need a programmer, you need artists, probably need some kind of musician or sound effects person, an animator. There's a whole raft of different
Yep.
kinds of
Yep.
people who go into making this game, and it's like all these different kinds of people who maybe wouldn't have been friends in school. They just like need to work together and communicate effectively. So it's difficult, but when it works, it's just amazing. But I do find, I think what you said is right on, and it's something that I've seen fall apart a few times. Is when let's say you get a passionate developer who wants to do something educational, and they don't reach out and work with a teacher or curriculum developer or the vice versa. There's like a teacher who's really passionate about making games, doesn't reach out to a developer and tries to make the game on their own. Like both of those situations are much less likely to work out well, right?
Yes.
It's really the collaboration is the important part. I think this is one of the learnings, especially we took away from Glass Lab, was like you do need to have both sides of that equation to make it work well.
Yeah. Yeah. No, it's challenging. I mean, it's fun. I did some games with the Hong Kong Polytechnic University here, and it was that model. I spoke at an event on software testing, and this guy comes up to me afterwards and he says, "Oh, I teach computer science classes at the Poly U, and I saw that you have a game on your Agile website. I created this little game called Shoot the Poop that teaches Agile principles." But anyway, he saw it and he came to me and he said, I actually have some budget to do something with a game to teach, agile stuff, project management. Do you
Yeah,
want to work with me? And of course, I looked at him and I said, "Oh, you have money?
yeah.
I'm in."
Right.
Yeah.
Exactly. That's the
So,
key part.
right. But it was collaborative, right? So,
Yeah,
he had, a course and he had, learning objectives. And so we sat down together and we built a Kanban game. And then later we came back and built a Scrum game. And so it's
awesome.
kind of a simulation, but yeah, but it was fun, and we actually went several rounds of that one. It was a little more elaborate, so the first release we weren't quite happy with, and he went back, got some more funding, and we did a
Awesome.
version 2 of the Scrum game, and yeah, but it was a lesson for me in that trying to integrate something into a school. Because if I just gone off and done this on my own and then went to the school and said, "Oh, I got this Scrum game," yeah, they would have gone, "That's nice,"
Right,
you
right,
know.
right, right. Yeah.
Right. But the fact that we built it together, and then some other departments within the university said, "Oh, yeah, we're teaching project management within this context. You've got this thing that's way better than a lecture, and so I've gone in and done, workshops and um, I've also done some business ones too. We used the game on the business side, agile community, in
Nice.
town, we've done some workshops and stuff with it. So
I think that's brilliant. Like I sort of think about it like a push versus pull model. Like I can try to
yeah,
build something and then push it into the schools, or the schools can come and actually have the need and they can pull. And
there you
it's
go. Talking
definitely
Kanban
it's
to me.
great.
This is it's
I'm
like
bridging
dirty
again.
talking now, right?
Well, again, it's kind of coming back to risk. It's like the fact
Yeah.
that you're coming to me, boy, that reduces my risk a lot. I
Yes.
love that. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. So we need more of these
Yeah.
relationships, and I do feel it, right? I feel like a lot of educators are now going,
Mm.
I want to do games. How do I do games? And I think there's a lot more of those opportunities, say a pull instead of a push.
Yeah. I
Yeah.
think that the finances can hang people up. I think at least here in the U.S. pretty frequently is like you have an educator who's passionate and wants to have some experience from the classroom, and then maybe they approach a developer and they find out the kind of numbers we're talking about is a little bit gives you the willies.
Yeah, yeah. No, it's not easy. All right, I'm breaking this conversation into two parts because I talk too much. It was just so interesting talking to Mark, and I kept injecting my own thoughts and observations. His experiences, working with these brilliant and passionate folks, influencing the direction of games for learning is just inspiring. So please listen to part two, where we're going to talk more about the business models and um, the marketplace for education games, and we're going to talk about the impact of AI on education and game development. Okay, if you have not subscribed yet, please hit the button. We've got so much great content coming, more guests with inspirational stories of innovation and education you don't want to miss. So I'm Eric Byron. Thanks for listening to the Education Innovators podcast, and thanks to all those education innovators out there. You are making a difference.